PJs. Look at those.
Camouflage pajamas. That's fantastic.
You know, I actually...
They're good photos. They got the show in the background with the slippers.
That.
We're glad you're
I like slippers with that have like the hard surface on the bottom so you can walk out and take the trash out.
Yes.
You know, you can transition inside and outside.
They need to be functional a little bit.
So I actually wear my slippers into work, and then you've seen me in them, and then because I wear my heels, and any woman that wears heels understands they're not necessarily comfortable, so I put them back on when I leave home.
Yeah. We'll get to, I'm going to show you, and I brought some slippers to work this morning.
Yeah.
But first,
I'll see you later.
So last night,
you want to talk about slippers all out?
No, I don't. I would love to. Actually, I would love to, but I want to talk about the mainstream media and how hysterical they got last night. Because, boy, if you read the headlines, man, they were fast and furious last night because Donald Trump accepted a phone call from the Taiwanese president on a congratulatory phone call for him becoming president of the United States. But if you read all of these headlines, oh my gosh, we're about to go to war with China.
Yeah.
Look at the New York Times headline, how Trump's calls to world leaders are upsetting decades of
Politico says diplomatic blow-up, and the LA Times diplomatic crisis, and CNN showdown with China. One phone call taken by the president-elect, and Abby, you made that point so well last hour, that it's not as if he's the president of the United States.
Yeah.
He's incoming. He's receiving congratulatory phone calls. And he's, you know, listen, we're talking to a Democratic ally who we supply and we've worked with for a long time.
And frankly, you look at Taiwan, and their values are very much aligned with the United States, which you cannot say for China. China is our biggest trading partner, so he's going to have to delicately find the right way to handle that once he's in office. But I, like you guys, was sitting eating dinner last night with my family, and you're getting your alerts on your phone and seeing Taiwan trending on Twitter. I'm like, what's going on?
Right.
It felt as if we were starting World War III. And just to tell people we are not, I mean, this is about as harmless as it gets. They literally called him to congratulate him. He tweeted about it saying, I just called back saying, thank you.
Yeah. Well, but the right flipped out about this. Senator Chris Murphy tweeting this last night.
The left did.
Yeah, the left did. What did I say?
The right.
Oh, the right.
It's okay.
Yeah, so, sorry. The left. Chris Murphy from Connecticut tweeted this. What has happened in the last 48 hours is not a shift. These are major pivots in foreign policy without any plan. That's how wars start. We had Ambassador Bolton on the show earlier.
That's true. So Senator Murphy from Connecticut fancies himself a foreign policy intelligentsia, likes to go out and hem and haw about all the nuances of diplomacy. And so we're starting some major diplomatic rift. And we asked a guy who knows a lot about diplomacy, as you mentioned, Ambassador John Bolton, about why he would make or take this phone call. This is what the ambassador had to say.
It's ridiculous to think that the phone call upsets decades of anything. But I do think it's important that people understand the President of the United States should talk to whomever he wants if he thinks it's in the interest of the United States. And nobody in Beijing gets to dictate who we talk to. My view has been for some time that we should be upgrading our relations with Taiwan. And I know that's going to cause heartburn in Beijing, but it's a reality. This is a nation of over 20 million people. They have a democratic government, a free press, a free market. They meet all the customary international law definitions of statehood. So when a democratically elected leader calls the President of the United States, I say, you bet he takes the call.
And that right there, that gentleman, former Ambassador John Bolton, had a meeting with President-elect Trump just a few days ago.
Just yesterday, I think it was.
Yeah, would he be on the short list for Secretary of State? We asked him that question. He said, I'm not talking.
No comment.
But he did say he would accept that
He said he wants it, and he would take it, obviously. Actually, next hour, we have my dad on. He was ambassador to China.
Yeah.
And so of all days, I feel like he'll have some thoughts on this. So we're going to ask him when he joins us.
Well, speaking of the transition team, so we had Ambassador Bolton on. He may be on that short list for Secretary of State. What about other nominations coming this week? And we see that General David Petraeus is going to be under the microscope tomorrow because he's got an interview with ABC.
Yeah, and I think that's all planned from their end to see how he handles certain questions that that Petraeus knows are going to be lodged at him.
Right, the classified information.
Right, that people say, you know, Mr. Trump, how can you be so hard against Hillary Clinton about her emails and saying you were going to prosecute her, and now you're backing away from that? How can you put someone like General Petraeus up for the top position of your cabinet? I think some people have concerns there.
Yeah, no, and this is a deliberate thing from the president-elect. I mean, between David Petraeus and Mitt Romney and Rudy Giuliani and Ambassador Bolton and other names that have been listed, I mean, listen, this is an critically important job as Secretary of State. You want to see people go through that crucible. Bob Corker is also on that list. The conservatives like certain people, insiders like others. And so this process gives him a chance almost to vet in real time in the public space, something that he's comfortable with. And he's shown as an executive he's willing to do. So no one knows who's going to be picked other than the president-elect,
Well,
and that's very clear.
You saw that with
He's
Mike
clearly
Pence.
okay with this process.
We saw that with like in the 11th hour with Mike Pence, right? And who was going to get the vice president? No one knew. People were telling us from the Trump side that no one knew but Trump.
It kind of came out of nowhere. So there are three things I think that they're probably looking at for Secretary of State. One is, can they get through confirmation, most importantly? Two is, are they going to be loyal to me? And three, maybe most importantly as well, is, are they good at that? Are they best at doing that job? So you look at that list we just laid out, it looks like all of them have something that they can't get past.
Well, they also they also all come with assets.
Some sort of assets.
Yeah, I mean, but also some
baggage.
Right? Everyone's got some baggage.
It's a tough job.
And Democrats right now, they've got a lot of baggage, and they've got to get through and try to figure out what in the world happened. Well, they thought they were going to put all their attention and concerns towards Howard Dean. He was going to right this ship and figure out, as the new DNC chair, get them out there. Organizer Chris Christie back in it again, despite leaving a meeting with the president-elect. He's said to be interested in becoming the new RNC chairman. No word on what the two talked about, though. Pete?
Thanks, Clayton. Well, controversy surrounding the far-left frontrunner for DNC chair. Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison, who is Muslim, has called for a individual black state and defended anti-Semitic figures. But some of his Democratic colleagues are still standing by him. But should that disqualify him for contention for the top post? Here to debate it is political analyst Amy Holmes and Democratic strategist Danielle McLaughlin. Thank you both for joining us this morning. First, this has all been triggered again by new sound and new tape that came out from Keith Ellison in 2010, where he's talking about Israel. We're going to play that tape and then get you both to react to that. Here's Keith Ellison.
The United States foreign policy in the Middle East is governed by what is good or bad through a country of 7 million people. A region of 350 million all turns on a country of 7 million. Does that make sense? No. Is that logic?
Danielle, is that your future chairman?
We'll see. We've got till the end of February to make a decision, and what Keith Ellison has said about that tape is that it was taken out of context, and what he really meant was the fact that Israel is clearly important, but that Democrats and Republicans should take into consideration folks from all around that region when we're putting together American foreign policy.
But that was Amy, that's from 2010. I saw
Correct.
a good bit of context there. What do you think?
Certainly, and it's also wrong to say that our Middle East foreign policy is driven by 7 million people. In point of fact, from the mid-1990s, we've given Palestinians over $5 billion in aid, Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza. As we know, during the George Bush administration, we have very close ties with Saudi Arabia. The current administration, President Obama, when he made those remarks, was closening our relationship with Iran, trying to put together what he considers an anti-nuclear deal. So just kind of on the face of it, it's wrong. If you want to look at whether or not it's anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic, I'll let other people make that argument. But I would point out that just last night, Chaim Saban, he's the billionaire owner of Univision, major Democratic donor, he came out and said last night in Washington, D.C., that Congressman Ellison is, in his view, an anti-Semite, and that he would be a disaster for the Jewish community's relationship with the Democratic Party.
I did see that. Another prominent Democrat, Chuck Schumer, who's been a strong supporter of Israel, has backed Keith Ellison. However, this is what, but I sense a double standard a little bit here, because Senator Schumer has leveled charges of anti-Semitism against somebody else in the Trump administration. This is what he had to say about Steve Bannon.
The things he said are reprehensible, and we're going to keep a really careful eye on the president and on him.
So wait, is he talking about Steve Bannon or Keith Ellison?
He's talking about Steve Bannon, and I think the difference is that Keith Ellison has come out many times, including an open letter to the ADL in the last couple of days, saying, if I was misrepresented, I apologize. Actually, the ADL was fully supportive of him alongside unions until this tape came out. Right, which they no longer are. I suspect that there will be more coming together with the ADL to have a meeting of the minds. Keith Ellison spoke in a synagogue in 2006, and he totally disavowed many of the things that he had said.
But that tape came out in 2010.
Correct, and also Keith Ellison was one of only 8 congressmen that voted against funding the Iron Dome. That's the anti-missile defense in Israel that's actually been very successful at repelling Hamas rockets that are being shot into Israel, usually on a daily basis. But I think what's interesting, if I were advising Republicans, I would tell them, Zip, zip, sit back, enjoy the popcorn. If Democrats actually choose someone who is this polarizing, this divisive within his own party, remember, the White House is actually looking at alternatives. They've already said that they would prefer Secretary of Labor Thomas Perez over Keith Ellison.
Yeah, is this the direction you want your party to go?
No, of course it's not. And we have to remember that this tape came out from a right-wing group that is looking to drive a wedge between Ellison and the Jewish Democrats. And that's not what we want to happen. But I totally agree with Amy. If we've all got all of this nonsense that we have to deal with, we already have enough on our plate. He has suggested a 3,000 county strategy, not just a 50-state strategy. But if there is too much here, it's going to be a distraction, and we may have to look elsewhere.
And I would add this is not great for Democrats when just in March of 2014, when he was on Bill Maher's show, he said that he wished the Democratic Party would come out against the Second Amendment.
That might be a bit divisive, but you guys are fantastic.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. All right.
Other liberal blogs are not.
Well, we know who to ask. It is Kurt the Cyber Guy with us this morning. Tell us about that.
Hey, good morning. Hey, raise your hand if you have ever logged onto Facebook and seen one of your friends post a fake news story that turns out not to be true, right?
I fell for a story like last year when someone posted that Breaking Bad was coming back to television. I got super excited about it and tweeted it, and a bunch of my friends said that was a fake news story.
That's the problem. Then you tweet it, and then it just exacerbates.
Right. You end up propagating fake news, right?
Right.
So this is a huge dilemma. And you know that Mark Zuckerberg has come out, and he's denied that the political election season really was not influenced by any of this fake news. It's all over the place of the 1.79 billion people that log on to Facebook. But he did agree that Facebook needs to do something about misinformation and this fake news thing, and he says we're going to do it. So he put his panel of people together. They've yet to really do anything, except the mainstream media just fell for a fake story that a tech blog picked it up that says, we're going to go ahead and start flagging stories that aren't true. Well, it wasn't even Facebook that's doing that. It's an add-on to a browser. If you use the Chrome browser from Google, sure, it has this add-on that you can get called BS Detector that will do that, and it'll go across all of these sites, whether they're right-wing sites or left-wing sites or regular sites. It'll simply look at it all and flag whether a story is true or not.
Is it even?
But who's doing it? Who's deciding? Right. It's just some, some guy in his basement that's actually deciding this kind of stuff. Is it an algorithm?
Is it an
algorithm?
None
of it has been made public. None of it has been told to us as to how that comes about.
So what are they looking for then?
Well, the truth is, this isn't the answer. The answer is not some third-party Joe Blow in his basement coming up with an algorithm that says, hey, well, I'll be the detector. I'll tell you if it's real or not. Yeah. It really is going to boil down to us getting a lot smarter to identify what stories' sources are true or not. And look at this. Stanford University just finished up a survey. 7,000 students have been polled and asked, and they were shown several news headlines. And in the process, they were shown good ones and bad ones, and they were saying, well, which ones are which? Well, 80 to 90% of these students could not identify the news source to know whether it was newsworthy or not. Well, that's a huge problem.
These are students, and, you know, we know what they're getting on snowflake campuses these days.
Hey, come on.
The point you raise is an important one. Who's the decider? Who decides what is or is not legitimate news? Here's some sites that have been flagged through this tool that you're talking about. WorldNet Daily, WND, is dubbed extremely biased. Breitbart, classification pending, meaning we can't really tell you what we think about it yet. InfoWars is dubbed a conspiracy theory, yet look at these four blogs on the left that have no labels on them whatsoever. The Daily Kos, Think Progress, MoveOn.org, which is actually a 501c4 and C3 advocacy group and not a news source at all, right there. And then the Huffington Post as well. So if those four sites are getting no label, but Breitbart is getting a label, what does it tell you about this so-called algorithm?
Here's what it tells me, is that the old established media brands, the strong companies like the Fox Newses are going, hey, good day for us, because ultimately what's going to happen is that we're going to say, okay, we can't even trust these blogs we thought we could trust. And we're going to start seeing, ultimately, Facebook will decide that it'll be Fox News that comes up, or it'll be another major media company that comes up as a source, and these other sources will fall down that don't have much credibility.
Well, couldn't that happen just through the market of ideas anyway? Why do I need someone telling me the red label whether this is legit or not?
And then Facebook, which CEO Mark Zuckerberg says, we're not a media company. Of course you are.
He's one of the biggest media companies in the world.
Yeah.
More people watch video on Facebook.
What gives them the right to censor the news that's coming out?
And has a huge impact on how young people especially are thinking about news stories.
Everybody.
So
everybody.
Yeah. All right, Kurt, good to see you this morning.
Dilemma continues.
It does continue. We do have some other headlines to get to this morning, starting with this.
Election, hundreds of students, faculty, and staff at Emory University petitioned the administration to de-designate as a sanctuary for illegal immigrants.
And among the demands, work with police to minimize ICE enforcement on campus, offer legal support for undocumented students, and add courses on the undocumented experience.
But one Georgia state lawmaker says, no way. State Representative Earl Earhart joins us this morning to talk about it. Nice to see you this morning. Welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks.
So you're saying not so fast, and you're proposing some legislation to stop this in its path. What are you proposing?
I'm just proposing to make it very simple. If you don't follow the law, if you advocate, you enable breaking the law, then the state funds and the federal funds are not going to follow you. It's it's not law breaking 101. That seems to be what's happening in these infantile studies courses or programs that some of these universities across the country are putting together, and it's time the taxpayers stop subsidizing those. And here in Georgia, it's a fairly simple equation. We'll just cut it off.
So you are in the state of Georgia. What has the response been so far to the bill you're proposing, and how likely is it that that would actually go through?
I'm very, very confident that they'll pass. I've had most of my colleagues have called me and said, keep it up. Let's make sure that we don't fund this. This is absurd. These infantile, pampered children who have seen nothing but participation trophies all their lives, they need to see that there's consequence to this kind of action. If they want to protest and they want to do this, that's just fine. Do it on their own nickel.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had some hate mail, though, as well. I mean, this is a pretty controversial bill.
You know, you get that hate mail. I've gotten it over the years. I'm used to it. It's not. I don't need a safe space. Unlike them, I've failed in my life. I've had adversity, and you pick yourself up. You continue to go on, and generally, good ideas like this. My experience has been you're successful, and taxpayers don't like funding petulant temper tantrums from overindulged kids.
What would these safe spaces mean for these students if they were allowed to go through? Take us through exactly what that would even look like.
What I assume it'll look like, you'd have a university administration, a university president who is saying to the law enforcement, both federal marshals and state enforcement agents, that you don't have to follow the law. Then you unfortunately put those law enforcement people who have taken an oath to uphold the law in a terrible place. I would assume they would, just like they do in some of the sanctuary cities, not comply with the law. You don't get to pick and choose which laws you want to enforce. That's a terrible example for these university administrators to set for the students they're supposed to be teaching. So that's the form it'll generally take. But if they do that, they're going to lose millions in research grants and scholarship grants for these students. They're not doing those students a service at all. They're doing them a terrible disservice.
All right. Representative Earhart, we'll see how all of this plays out from here. Thanks for being with us.
I think we'll be successful.
All right, well, coming up, some
So is he assaulting the press, or is he just speaking truth about the bias of the press?
Well, you had Chris Cillizza at the Washington Post basically tweets, here you have a president booing the press, and shouldn't we value basically the freedom of the press? And, I value the First Amendment rights, the freedom and the freedom of the press, but I also think that's important that you're able to freely boo the press, because they really are unfair in their coverage of Donald Trump. At that rally, Ben White of CNBC tweeted out, I think it's ridiculous that Donald Trump keeps holding these rallies. And then in a subsequent tweet says, why is Donald Trump, it's odd that Donald Trump is still campaigning. And he failed to mention that President Barack Obama did the exact same thing in 2008. And this is where this double standard lies. Like, you have the rhetoric of Donald Trump, but then you have the record of Barack Obama. And Barack Obama used the Espionage Act more than any of his previous presidents combined to prosecute reporters and whistleblowers within the government, and to basically silence them and scare them. Everyone remembers James Rosen and what he went through, as well as the AP getting all of their all the reporters' call logs subpoenaed by the DOJ. Now that is real. Yeah. That is, and that is a record and not just rhetoric.
Well, what is the future of the press? I mean, obviously, you guys live and die by ad revenue and viewership and readership. What's going to happen to those sites, those websites, those channels that were dishonest, according to Mr. Trump?
well, I don't think anything's going to happen to them because they've doubled down on their narrative. I think there was a few weeks after he won where they wanted to be more reflective, and you saw some New York Times reporters actually going into the heartland of America and interviewing Trump supporters to try to understand where they're coming from. But now they've doubled down on this. We don't want to normalize Donald Trump. We've got to make sure that we're going after him aggressively. So it really is, I think we're back to where we began during the campaign, and Donald Trump's going to have a hard 4 years with the press.
No, that's right. I mean, there's a big difference, as you point out, between a free press and a fair press. So we appreciate your fair commentary this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kelly. Coming up here on the show, the president-elect says he will announce more cabinet picks next week.
People are not connecting with their message, and a big complaint with Hillary Clinton. When I asked a number of even Democrats that went Trump's direction, they said, we just don't even know why she's running. What is their platform? What do they stand for? And that is whoever takes this job, they're going to have to figure that out.
That's a great point. And you don't turn the page with Howard Dean. And Howard Dean is the past, just like with Hillary Clinton, just like them choosing Nancy Pelosi, the human ATM for candidates that might be functional in a political sense, but as a narrative, how does it move them forward? And the same to be said for the only remaining candidate, it seems, in Keith Ellison, the Minnesota congressman, who has received even more criticism now that there's a videotape out there where he's using very clearly anti-Semitic language. And a big DNC donor came out, the owner of Univision, just yesterday, who had supported Keith Ellison. Now he's going back on his position and how he feels about it. This is what that particular owner of Univision had to say. He said, if you go back to his positions, and these are the positions of Keith Ellison on Israel, his papers, his speeches, the way he has voted, he is clearly an anti-Semite, anti-Israel individual. Words matter and actions matter more. Keith Ellison would be a disaster for the relationship between the Jewish community and the Democratic Party. Those are strong words from a big donor against the guy who's supposed to be the future of the Democratic Party.
But this does come down to money and organizing. But we saw in this last election that money and organizing weren't enough for the Clintons.
I was just going to say, but on top of all of that is your message.
Right.
I mean, what Mr. Trump got right was something that clearly resonated with people across the country that people didn't fully understand, I don't think, during the election.
And it's amazing to watch that the Democrats didn't understand Facebook this election. I mean, these were the Democrats really were the team that understood the power of those small donations, that message of social media. And when John McCain's camp was like left flat-footed, wondering what in the world did just happen to us? The internet happened to us. Here, Donald Trump's campaign used Facebook with these small donations and crushed Hillary Clinton's side.
I think he even said that Twitter, he said from his experience on this campaign, is now more powerful, in his opinion, than even money.
Oh, of course. And Facebook, you talk about Facebook. Of course, that's a bit of an echo chamber, too. You get a bunch of people talking to each other, reinforcing each other's opinions. You talked about message. It's also messenger. Hillary Clinton was a flawed messenger. Keith Ellison is also a flawed messenger, a radical who's prone to sort of rage and not rage, I shouldn't say that, prone to outburst as a reaction to opponents. They've got to reach a class of voters that they've lost. And I don't know that, I think there's a sense that, is Keith Ellison really our guy that's going to do that? The problem is they look over their shoulder to the bench.
I was just going to say, where's the bench,
is empty.
But the
bench is empty. Who do we put in, Coach?
Do remember that that's exactly what Republicans said, and they put up 16 potential candidates eventually for the primary. So, and then we got Donald Trump out of mix of all of that. So, who knows?
Yeah. Politics is an interesting.
I'd rather have a full bench than an empty bench, though, and that's what Republican had, was a full bench. Even though
that's true.
But on the left, who is it really? And we asked a couple of folks in political commentary earlier, and there were really no answers.
We've got a full bench of other headlines to get to this morning as well. We do. Chris Collins, good to see you, sir.
Yes, good morning, Abby.
Thanks for being here. So we'll start with that. I mean, he said just a couple of nights ago at his rally in Cincinnati that there are a number of big picks coming, literally in his words, very soon as next week. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, that's true. We have about, you would say, half the cabinet is selected. There's 15 members. There's other positions as well. If we count General Mattis, who's officially going to be nominated on Monday, but it was all pure Trump that he did it the way he did it, his thank you tour. I think you will see several next week. Certainly that's what we've been told as well. We have 6 or 7 to go at the cabinet level, but then we've got a lot of other positions to fill, whether it's the director of NASA or EPA, a lot of administrative heads. So there's still an awful lot of work to go. But boy, the progress we've made, it's pretty laughable when a couple of weeks ago the liberal left was saying the transition was in disarray, and now you see him making all these selections well before any president before him has been able to make the progress.
Let's talk about Secretary of State. What about Secretary of State? Will we see that this week? And if there is a Romney pick, for instance, and there's been a lot of outrage among Trump supporters of saying, no, he was insulting to Mr. Trump, no way. How would a Mr. Trump deal with his own supporters if he picks a Romney?
Well, I mean, I've certainly been on the record saying what I said about Governor Romney, and I don't take any of it back, but I've also been very clear. I will support President-elect Trump in any and all decisions he makes for the personnel to help him do the job that he's got to do. And I can tell you, he has a lot of latitude with his supporters. We're just so excited, making America great, and already the position he's taking. He's doing it his way. We love it, and if he says that Governor Romney is the person he needs,
well, when is he gonna
we can disagree with it, but we'll support
When
it.
is he going to pick state, you think? Next week?
I believe you'll see it next week. That's going to be up to President-elect Trump. But, yeah, we know who the 4 finalists are, and it's a tough decision. There's all of them have pluses and minuses. They're all qualified. And, that's going to be his call. Who does he think he can work best with? And we'll all support him in that.
Representative, you mentioned how the media dubbed it in disarray 2 weeks ago. Well, they're trying to find any way to poke holes in the process. Of course, also saying it's the richest cabinet, billionaires in the cabinet potentially. What do you say to the critics that are saying, wow, it's just the rich guys from New York stocked into the cabinet?
Well, I would say we have smart, accomplished, in many cases entrepreneurial, private sector individuals coming into the cabinet. That would be the dream team, and we've said this all along. Those are the kinds of folks. These are not people coming to government through a revolving door to go back out on the other end 4 years later, like Bill Clinton did, and make hundreds of millions of dollars. These are folks who have already been and made their success. I think it's kind of refreshing to have folks coming into the cabinet that have no plans after they serve our country to then go cash in like the Clintons have done and a few others. No, I think having a successful, accomplished people is better than having, community activists and people of that sort.
Representative Chris Collins from New York, we appreciate you being here this morning. Thanks so much.
Okay, always good
Thanks
to be
for being
with
with
you.
us. Good to see you.
And Donald Trump made that point. Officials say they're looking into making changes after how that turned out. Clayton, over to you.
Thanks, Pete. Well, the election is over, but tempers are still flaring between Clinton and Trump teams. Things getting heated in a post-election forum between the campaigns. Listen to this exchange.
If providing a platform for white supremacists makes me a brilliant tactician, I am glad to have lost. I would rather lose than win the way you guys did.
Do you think I ran a campaign where white supremacists had a platform? You going to look me in the face and tell me that?
It did. Kellyanne
really?
did.
The frustrations on both sides are clear, but have Democrats learned anything from the election results? Here now to debate this and react is Democratic strategist and 2008 Clinton campaign advisor Richard Goodstein and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. Nice to see both of you this morning. Richard, I want to start with you. You hear that argument back and forth that the reason that Trump won was because they gave a platform to white supremacists. Do you buy that?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. Although I have to say, I was listening to your commentary earlier when you talk about how Trump crushed Hillary. It's an odd term to use about somebody who got 2.5 million fewer votes, who got under 47% of the vote, less than Mitt Romney got. It's a funny way to talk about crushing somebody. I will say this, though. You know, we heard this term alt-right. That's a kind of an alt-reality, the notion that Trump did the crushing. Look, there are facts, Clayton. Trump tapped into the birther movement. He talked about Muslims and Mexicans. It's no coincidence that there have been hundreds and hundreds of racist and bigoted incidents ever since the election, and people saying Trump, Trump, Trump as the backbone for what they're doing. So
Dinesh.
Trump retweeted. He retweeted white supremacists.
Right.
So how is that not tapping into white supremacy? I don't get it.
Dinesh,
how is that even an argument?
Dinesh, does Richard have a point here that Trump didn't do anything to quell those individuals whose voices may be representative by the white supremacy movement and others? What do you say to that?
Well, this kind of white supremacy allegation is part of the modern Democratic playbook. I remember in 1980, people dragged out 5 toothless white supremacists and said to Reagan, you're catering to white supremacy. You can look at these guys, they've endorsed you. And Reagan said, well, you notice that they may have endorsed me, but I haven't endorsed them. And I think this is the key issue, that the Democratic Party historically has been the party of white supremacy. All the institutions of white supremacy, from slavery to segregation, the Ku Klux Klan, lynching, these were created, promoted, and sustained by the Democratic Party. From the WikiLeaks revelations, we see that Democrats even now talk privately about blacks, about Hispanics, even about Catholics, in a way that you never see Republicans talk. There's nothing equivalent on the Republican side. So this is a scapegoat to try to explain an election result that is very embarrassing for the Democratic Party. They had more money, they had the organization, the Republican Party was divided, and still Trump won. That leaves these guys with a lot of explaining to do.
Richard, did the Democrats get the message, losing 200 counties that had once gone to Barack Obama in areas where this used to be the backbone of the Democratic Party, in West Virginia and in Pennsylvania and Michigan?
First of all, I have to say to Dinesh, you know, these incidents, these hundreds of incidents around the country where people are saying build a wall against Hispanic student basketball players in a high school, that's not something that Democrats are making up. This is reality. I'm sorry. Look, to answer your question, Clayton, obviously there was a message problem that Democrats had. They're the ones who, on trade deals, are standing up for labor rights. They're the ones who are standing up for OSHA, for health and safety regulations, when there's an effort to tear down regulations. They believe that they're the ones who have stood up for blue-collar, these white voters who they lost. No question, they lost them. And I think the Democrats have to figure out a way to reframe what they're doing to make sure people know that, just like Trump's taking credit for these 1,000 jobs and poo-pooing the 3.4 million jobs that were saved or created during the stimulus program. Look, there's message issues. Yes.
Well, let me address directly this issue about building the wall. Remember that the reason that we've seen this decimation of the white working class is due to the combined forces of technology, globalization, and immigration. Trump was the only candidate directly addressing those issues. He said, I'll do something about immigration, I'll do something about trade. Obama and Hillary have done nothing about these issues and essentially been blaming third parties. Oh, it's CEOs and corporate jets. That's why you don't have a job. Trump was at least putting his finger on the right issue. You can't write it off to racism. It wasn't that at all.
All right, guys, we got to leave it there. Dinesh and Richard, thanks so much for joining us this morning. This debate will continue as this post-mortem of the 2016 election continues. Thanks, guys. Well, you could say the New York, all those headlines over the past number of months from the New York Times and their coverage of this campaign, and they sort of came out with a little bit of a mea culpa, a little bit of an apology about 2 weeks ago, saying maybe we kind of got things wrong a little bit. We're not really sure, but we're going to reassess.
Yeah. Now we're going to be a little bit more transparent. So last night, our own Tucker Carlson on the show, in only the way that he can, brought on the public editor for the New York Times and challenged her on their coverage over the election and post-election. Here's how that went.
It makes no sense to me in terms of what the New York Times claims it is and wants to be. And as you say, their business model. Why would you cut off half of America and make them feel like this is not their New York Times? That comes from being in New York, being in a, in a certain circle and seeing the world a certain way, not being in touch with people who don't live like them or don't live in cities and who are the ones that elected like Donald Trump to the presidency.
Now, when you say that the journalists who walk in the front door of the Times building are doing their best to be fair, I would believe you, except I know for a fact that's not true because I read their Twitter feeds. Here's one. This is November 15th. Pardon me for asking, but what qualifies Jared Kushner to have a seat at the presidential table? There's Eric Lipton, another reporter. White House's QVC. It has started. Here's Peter Baker. For a new president from reality television, a cabinet selection that resembles a pageant. Are you kidding? These are news reporters saying this stuff?
Everybody's going to have their personal political views. We all do. But they ought to be personal. And if you sign up to be a journalist, then that's what you ought to be.
So there you go. She's sort of, I mean, she's going to have a tough job on Monday morning when she walks in there because there she goes. She says, like, you got to keep your opinions to yourself. Well, and that, maybe living in this skyscraper looking down on the rest of America is not sufficient.
And the public editor's job is to view the coverage and be critical of it. And at the beginning she was, but then you confront with those reporters, and what can she even say?
I love when Tucker goes, I would believe you, but let's just look at the facts here. Let me just pull these tweets out.
As always, well done, Tucker Carlson.
All right, we do have some other headlines to get to this morning, starting with this, an embarrassing flaw in the U.S. immigration system so bad that it now has all new citizenship ceremonies on hold. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goldblatt, demanding an immediate investigation after immigration officials found what's being called a major security flaw in the electronic system used for background checks. And apparently that system failed for a number of people seeking citizenship. Goldblatt is now asking Homeland Security to find out just how many people have slipped through the cracks. And it is a story that sparked national outrage. The college that banned the American flag from campus now flying our symbol of freedom once again. The president of Hampshire College in Massachusetts first lowered the flag to mourn Hillary's election loss, well, then later took down that flag after it was set on fire when President-elect Trump won. Jesse Waters tried to talk to the president about that decision. Here's how it went.
Don't you realize the whole country's laughing at you right now?
Come on, get your foot out of my door.
President-elect, why did you remove the flag?
I don't want to talk to you about it.
Woo. Well, after 2 weeks of protests, the president changed his mind, saying the flag can fly at full staff, but only because he wants the threats to stop. His announcement on Thursday night at the first stop of his post-election thank you tour.
We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis as our Secretary of Defense. They say he's the closest thing to General George Patton that we have, and it's about time.
Well, now Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand may try to hold up Mattis's nomination by opposing the waiver that he needs Congress to pass in order to serve in the cabinet.
That's right. Former Navy SEAL and Montana Congressman Ryan Zinke served with General Mattis in Iraq back in 2004, and he joins us now to weigh in. First, out the gates, Congressman James Mad Dog Mattis, what's your take?
Well, you know, I followed him in Fallujah. In my book, American Commander, I talk about that, and he is a warrior. He is reluctant to go to war, but he understands if we do go to war and commit troops, you got to make sure they have the right equipment, right training, and right rules of engagement to win decisively on the field of battle. Mattis is a warrior. He understands that. And he also understands that the Department of Defense, we're too bureaucratic, too top-heavy on the front end, and we need a warrior to cut through that red tape and reform, refit the Department of Defense, which will have a larger view today than it does.
Yeah, well, speaking of the red tape, Congress has to pass a waiver if you've served less than 7 years before taking this position. And Kirsten Gillibrand, as I just mentioned, is one of them that may make it challenging for him. How is that going to play out, and shouldn't it ultimately be who is best for that job?
Well, certainly the president should have his choice of who he wants to pick in the Department of Defense. This is a critical job, and it will have a broad influence because you look at where we are in the world today, our coalition partners, our allies need to be shored up and make sure that we know, they know, that we're going to hold our commitments. But on the Hill, you know, I think it's outrageous that someone would go off the gates and say, I'm going to prevent Donald Trump from picking his guy, which the military is absolutely behind Jim Mattis, on the basis of a waiver. This is exactly what's wrong with Washington.
The swamp strikes back, for sure. So let's say the waiver does happen. Is there any conflict on confirmation? What could or would the Democrats try to bring up against Mad Dog Mattis?
Well, probably he's not politically correct. And in my view, that's a strength.
That's a plus.
Probably that he's a reluctant warrior, but when he goes to war, he's serious about it. Again, I fought with him in Fallujah. He understands also that the backbone of our military is a sergeant and a chief petty officer. And we want to make sure that our troops are shored up and the troops have what they need.
Well,
he is a great, great pick.
Well, tell us more about him, because you are one of the individuals that has been with him more on a personal level. Tell us more about him as a person.
Well, I tell you, he's serious. He is an intellectual. Like General Mattis, we're all reluctant to go to war. We've seen it. We've seen the tragedy that war unfortunately, the war has on our Americans' treasure, both financial and our citizens. But when you go to war, there is no one better focused in making sure that we win. Oftentimes, he is aggressive, but his alternatives on the side, in Fallujah, for instance, there was a number of alternatives how to deal with it. General Mattis's normally wasn't the most aggressive, but believe me, his plans were assured that we would win. And he's respected. He's respected the front line, and that's what's important.
Amen. As he said, no better friend, no worse enemy, and the rank and file love him, which says a lot about who General Mattis is. So, Congressman, thanks a lot for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for being
Great to be with you.
You got it. All right, America is on the verge of an uproar.
Garrett Tenney is in Washington with a reaction on this. Good morning, Garrett.
Morning, y'all. There's certainly been a lot of blowback over this phone call with Taiwan's president, and it really just goes to show how the world is watching every move of President-elect Donald Trump to get an idea of how U.S. policy may change under his administration. In this case, the concern for some Democrats and foreign policy experts is the U.S.'s relationship with its largest trading partner, China. Yesterday, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy summarized a lot of the criticism in this tweet, saying, "What has happened in the last 48 hours is not a shift. These are major pivots in foreign policy without any plan. That's how wars start." Now, Taiwan is one of the most sensitive issues in the U.S.'s relationship with China. The communist nation regards Taiwan as part of its territory, while the island, which is only 100 yards offshore from mainland China, maintains its independence. And since 1979, the U.S. has walked a diplomatic tightrope with an official position that's somewhere in the middle. And since 1979, no American president or president-elect has spoken to a Taiwanese leader until yesterday. And the president-elect is defending his phone call, tweeting, "The president of Taiwan called me today to wish me congratulations on winning the presidency. Thank you." He continued saying, "Interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I should not accept a congratulatory call." You'll remember Mr. Trump had plenty of strong words for China on the campaign trail, though his transition team has not indicated that this phone call with Taiwan's president is any kind of foreshadowing of broader changes in U.S. policy, but it does clearly indicate that it will not be business as usual in the next administration. Clayton, Abby, and Pete?
Indeed. Right, thanks, Garrett. And you heard Geraldo's voice over here. We got to bring Geraldo Rivera in this morning.
Good morning.
I got to ask you this. Now, we're not talking about enough squash soup with you, but we will be with her dad in a little bit. Is there hypocrisy here? I mean, look, when President Obama normalizes relations with a communist country like Cuba, right, gets on the phone, and with the first international flight flying there last week, and then the president-elect is now being criticized for taking a call from a democracy, the president of a democratically elected government in Taiwan.
Yeah, but
I mean, I don't. Where was the outrage on the other side?
Taiwan, which was the sole representative of China for decades in American policy, the island of Formosa off the Chinese coast, where the nationalists fled when the communists took over. Pete knows the military history very well. At some point, Nixon went to China, big China, said, "You're the sole representative of the Chinese people." Taiwan then became kind of a political outlier, and our policy was to deal with China, the Republic of China. To take the call from the president of Taiwan, to take the call from the renegade island, so to speak, is a major diss for the people in the Republic of China with all their, hundreds of millions of people. So, it may be, I was just thinking about it, it is so outrageous an act in terms of diplomacy, it might be brilliant. It might be a way to jumpstart a new phase of U.S.-Chinese relations.
I don't know if you caught Ambassador Bolton on our show earlier this morning, who agrees with you. He thinks it's time for a shakeup. And at the end of the day, we send over $100 billion of weaponry to Taiwan. So it's sort of like doing this little fake dance for the last.
But here's the thing, though. You read the headlines last night, and if you were on Twitter at all, it felt as if we were heading into World War III. Just some of these headlines there, New York Times, how Trump's call to world leaders are upsetting decades of diplomacy. It goes on and on. But you think about what actually happened, Geraldo. This was just basically a call congratulating him, to which he responded, "Thank you." You're wondering why there was so much outrage in that moment. Not to mention, he's not even sworn in yet.
Well, I'll be curious, Abby, to see what your dad, the former ambassador, says about it. To me, this is why you need the pros around. You need someone to say, if you do that.
Don't you think the pros would have been around? I mean, he wouldn't have just decided to accept the call. Someone probably counseled them, hey, this is something.
I don't know.
I hope, but I don't know. But knowing him, I've known him for 4 decades. I love the guy, and particularly these, the last 6 weeks of Celebrity Apprentice. I was with him every day. He's the kind of guy who would just say, screw it, I'm going to talk to him. I don't care. Go shuffle some papers in your bureaucratic cubicle. I'm going to take the call from Taiwan.
And they come out of their office, and it's trending on Twitter. They call back the president of Taiwan.
I think it's a very big deal. I'd be interested to see what President Obama or the White House has to say about it. But what Bolton said might be true, Clayton. It may be that it's time, in the same way it took a right conservative President Nixon and Henry Kissinger to go and open China, which was, playing against caste.
No one thought it could happen.
Against type. No one thought it could happen. A liberal never could have done it, and the conservative did it. Maybe now this flamboyant new entity we have coming into the White House is exactly the one shaking it.
Or Reagan with the Soviet Union, the START treaties and all of that. I mean, it takes someone who you know is an anti-communist to do that. Same type of principle.
I think that if it's handled with any kind of finesse today, it'll be a one-day story.
So it's a shakeup, but there's another shakeup we want to talk about as well on the Democrat side.
Right.
Howard Dean yesterday pulled his name out for consideration of DNC chair, leaving Representative Keith Ellison there as the sole rep. But information has come out now about radical things he said in the past about Israel, things he said about a racial state many, many years ago. What's your take on Keith Ellison being kind of the standard bearer for the Democratic Party?
I think that Keith Ellison was a big Bernie Sanders supporter. So if the Democrats want to be the party of Bernie Sanders, I think Keith Ellison is their guy. A very hard left, at times even radical Democrat. He is one of the only two Muslims in the Congress, but they say that that's not the issue. The real issue with Keith Ellison, and it's not even his support of the Million Man March back in the day of Louis Farrakhan and some of the other things he has said in racial terms of creating a homeland within the United States for African Americans and things like that. You could attribute a lot of that to just being a kid. But it's his statements more recently about Israel. Israel is the, it's to be nuanced in your support of Israel, to vary at all from a hard pro-Israel line is extremely difficult in this country. And I think that you have a situation here where he is equivocating about support for Israel. I believe in the two-state solution. I'm talking Geraldo now. I believe that Israeli settlements in the West Bank are an impediment to
But he's not talking about policy positions. He's talking about conspiracies that Israel controls American
his
foreign
statements,
policy.
as discovered by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, made as recently as 2010, indicate that he believes that Israel is trampling on the rights of the Palestinians and so forth. And I think that might doom his candidacy. And if in any case, he's not the guy to unite the broader Democratic Party.
We'll get you out of here on this, Geraldo. What do the Democrats do now? Who do they have?
Right.
Where do they go? This holiday season for them right now has to be some deep soul searching.
I mean, they've lost, if you think about the Congress, 2010, 2012, 2014, and now 2016. What is the root of the problem?
I think the root of the problem is they got too arrogant in terms of their organization at the state and local level. That's where, when you have the state houses and the state legislatures drawing up what the districts look like, and they're all controlled by Republicans, or two-thirds of them are controlled by Republicans, the congressional districts favor the Republicans. So you have a situation where you have Donald Trump can win with 2 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton got. The Democrats have to start a grassroots organizing campaign. Now, going back to Ellison, what I don't understand, the ADL now opposes Ellison, but Chuck Schumer, who is now the minority leader of the United States Senate, or soon will be, supports him. So you see the beginnings of a civil war within the Democratic Party. To answer your question, Clayton, where they go, they have to get a guy or a woman with tremendous charisma and the strength to organize, and Nancy Pelosi won't be able to
You're saying it's organized,
person.
though. Isn't it message? I mean, what do they stand for? And they're conflicted.
Yeah, because that was the biggest
levels.
problem with Hillary Clinton is, why is she running? What is her actual message at the end
And Bernie
of the day?
Sanders' message was resonating. Why they were so angry that Hillary was their standard bearer.
You've just mentioned 3 different positions there, and it could also be which are they the party of color? Is that where the emphasis? Yeah. Are they the party of urban America? There are so many different strokes that they have to pick a lane.
Unions.
Really,
unions.
Unions as well.
And environmentalists.
You really. I think that it is sad to say that the only Democrat with that kind of stature is Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, the vice president, has no interest, it seems to me,
looking backward
in patching up party politics.
That's interesting. All right, Geraldo, good to have you here this morning.
Good to see you.
Always good to see you. All right, we do have some other headlines to get to this.
Boy, what an interesting story this is. 2 days after President-elect Trump got Carrier to keep 1,100 jobs from going to Mexico, Trump sending a new message to another company last night. Rexnord is the name of the company in Indiana. Trump tweeting this last night. Rexnord of Indiana is moving to Mexico and rather viciously firing all of its 300 workers. This is happening all over our country. No more. Trump's comments coming as Ford now saying it's willing to work with Trump to keep jobs in the U.S. So what's going on here? Let's bring in the host of Making Money on the Fox Business Network, Charles Payne, the one and only Charles Payne. Great to see you this morning.
Good morning.
So President Obama over the summer back in June at a town hall event said that, there's no magic wand. You can't actually just do this. You can't just wave a magic wand and keep 1,100 jobs here. And yet it was interesting because that was precisely what he was trying to do with Solyndra and sort of picking different companies. And now President-elect Trump has done this with Carrier. So what is the role of the federal government in saving these jobs?
Well, I think the role of the federal government is to create an economic backdrop so that companies don't even think about leaving. In other words, the whole thing is the carrot and stick approach.
Right.
One of the things that Barack Obama did as president is he lavished us every year with billions of dollars in new regulations, higher taxes, all of the things that make it hard to run a business. In fact, business creation itself went to an all-time low. So the first thing the president does is create an economic backdrop so that businesses want to stay here. It would also help if you had an economy that was moving, a booming economy. This is the first time we've ever had a president who didn't achieve 3% economic growth. So I think that's the main role right there. Now, you contrast that with the role of business. The role of business is to return money to their shareholders. Typically, that's what a business does. You try to bolster the bottom line, and you try to stay in business.
So when you look at, Sarah Palin wrote an opinion piece. I thought it was interesting because you have a lot of liberals coming out praising President-elect Trump for saving these 1,100 jobs. Then you have conservatives like Sarah Palin coming out and saying that this is crony capitalism and that this is not the role of the federal government, should not be picking winners and losers. It was the same criticism being leveled against President Obama for picking Solyndra and other companies. So does she have a point here?
Well, a lot of conservative economic purists bristled at this deal. The notion that the president-elect Trump put this deal in place. I would say, I think in this particular case, Donald Trump felt the need to fulfill a campaign promise and also a need to spur on this momentum of hope, this momentum of excitement. This
so
what I've been calling
symbolic, maybe.
It was partially symbolic. It was partially keeping a promise, but it was partially also the intangible part of a great economy is having people believe in that economy in the first place. We saw middle America, particularly the Rust Belt and other areas where people had given up in part because they had been forgotten. They feel like they're part of the process right now. So for Donald Trump's economic policies to work, for any president's economic policies to work, ultimately we must buy into it. So what he did, I think, was a brilliant stroke of genius. I think it's going to help dramatically. I thought the thank you tour coupled with that was phenomenal. But there are going to be some issues. Ford, you mentioned Ford and Reed.
Right.
They're still going to move jobs to Mexico. There are other elements. Besides the cheap labor, they have some great trade. They have great trade deals, Mexico with the rest of the world, that we don't. So, but we know we have a president who cares. And I'd like to see more of the carrot rather than the stick, although sometimes they both work.
Sometimes they both work. Charles, great to see you.
You too, buddy.
All right. Thanks so much, Charles. All right, coming up, our next guest created waterboarding and spent thousands of hours interrogating 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. So how does he feel about Trump's defense secretary pick, who disagrees with waterboarding? That's next.
His enhanced interrogation program joins us now. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure it is an absolutely fascinating book touching on all aspects of 9/11. But the issue of the day is, does waterboarding work? And it's something you know firsthand. First of all, does it work? And did it lead to intelligence that prevented another attack?
Well, EITs were certainly necessary to get information from detainees that allowed us to prevent another attack. So in some cases, waterboarding was the appropriate thing to do. In other cases, it wasn't as effective. But I think it's less about waterboarding because it was never a central part of the CIA's interrogation program, and it was only done on 3 detainees. less important than waterboarding itself, because the media seems to be obsessed with it, is the fact that at some point we are going to need some kind of legal coercion, and that's a conversation that I think America needs to have.
Indeed. So great point. You can't conflate waterboarding and enhanced interrogation techniques. That's a menu of options through coercion. Right. What do we need more at our disposal in light of the enemy that we're facing right now? Have we walked too far back and we're not able to interrogate the way we need to against a vicious enemy?
Our primary problem is we're going to run into the worst of the worst. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had secrets that he wanted to protect, and he didn't give them up when they tried tea and conversation for 2 days before he was ever sent to the black side. So he's not likely to give them up for less than being coerced. And so the essence of this thing is, yes, we need something. The Army Field Manual wouldn't have worked on him, and neither would Tea and Sympathy. So he needed to be coerced.
I'm sure fascinating aspects in that book. As you mentioned, only 3 actually faced waterboarding through the process, something used very rarely. I got to get your take on Donald Trump's new nomination of the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, known as a warfighter who doesn't mince words, but also has said that he disagrees with the technique of waterboarding. Here's President-elect Trump talking some audio about his take on General Mattis and this particular technique. Take a listen.
General Mattis is a strong, highly dignified man. I met with him at length, and I asked him that question. I said, what do you think of waterboarding? He said, I was surprised. He said, I've never found it to be useful.
And he goes on to say that he could get more with a 6-pack of beer. Do you agree with that?
Well, I have a lot of respect for General Mattis. From what I hear, he's a heck of a warrior. But I have had many years of experience interrogating top al-Qaeda terrorists, the senior leaders. And so what I would respectively ask General Mattis is, as a senior leader, if you were being held by our enemies, would you give up information that would allow them to capture and kill Americans and to disrupt our efforts to protect ourselves for a Michelob and a pack of Winstons? I don't think so. It's insulting to suggest that he would. And KSM wouldn't do that either. He didn't do that.
Indeed. James, one last question. The future of Guantanamo Bay is in question as a site where some interrogation did occur. Has Guantanamo Bay been an effective tool, and should it stay open?
I think Guantanamo Bay should stay open. We need to keep those people off our soil, and we excuse my language, we darn sure don't need to be letting them go. It should stay open.
There you go. There you have it. The man who himself interrogated KSM. The book is called Enhanced Interrogation. James Mitchell, thank you for your service to our country and for writing this book. I'm sure a lot of people will find it fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
You got it. All right.